Okay, so hi everyone, welcome to this new tutorial on TouchDesigner. This time we'll be looking at this sketch, which is a terrain moving with a noise and changing from lines to sphere. So we will take a look at how we can build and rebuild actually this sketch. It's going to be quite short. We don't need a lot of elements to do that. So let's start by deleting everything. So first thing we're going to add is a simple grid, which we will place on the ZX plane. So it's going to be a base for a terrain. And then we're going to add a noise. So here's the noise. And as you can see, the noise is already making the plane move. But we will now add the whole 3D elements. So first add right click and then add your geometry. And then we're going to add our camera and then our light. Finally, we will need our render, which is in the tops. And we will add a null so we can show all the visual at the end and show it in the background. So then we will change a little bit of the elements in the grid and the noise to make it larger. So first thing, we're going to change the size of our plane. So let's make it a bit larger, like maybe 8 by 8. And then we're going to also change the number of rows and columns. Because as you can see, all the terrain is moving a lot, but it's not very smooth. So because there's only 20 by 20, so we're going to change this value by making it 100 by 100. We need to be careful though, because if your FPS drop with 100 by 100, maybe you can go a little bit lower, because it really depends on your CPU, since all this calculation in the sub is done by your CPU. So following your computer, maybe change those values to adapt to make it more smoother in terms of animation. Now we're going to move our camera. So instead of moving simply the values, we're just going to drag inside the viewer of the camera. So as you can see, it has effects to the real camera and change the values. And now we're going to change our render so we can adjust the size of the final render. So we'll make it a square format like the example we had in the first place. And we're going to move again a little bit so we can hide the transparency zone at the bottom of the image. So we can just, so right now it's good. We don't have any transparency at the bottom. And now I can see a little more transparency. Let's move it again. And okay, now it's good. So the thing we're going to do is add our line material. The line material doesn't receive the light. So as you will see, it's basically showing you the lines of the geometry, but following if you're near or far, it's going to show them in white or gray. So as you can see, we can adjust on top there the distance values of far and near. And it's going to create more or less of this gradient effect that you can see right now. So we're going to change another element. So let's go into lines and change the colors. So what's going to be closer to us is going to be completely white, and what's in the background is going to be black. And also we're going to change the alpha to 0. So that's it. Then we're going to change the distances, so near and far. So it's going to change what we consider as near and what we consider as far. So we're going to try to achieve this kind of gradient effect where some part of the terrain disappears instead of seeing exactly where it stops. So this is what we're trying to achieve. So we can play with the different parameters. And then we can also change the size. So if it's closer or further away. So let's change a little bit of these values. So around 1.8. That seems good. Let's play again with the near. Oh, sorry. I just I just mixed the values up. So when it's closer to us, it's going to be 1.8, and when it's further away, it's going to be 0. So that's better. Let's adjust it again, and that's good. So now what you can see is that there's a little warning icon appearing because we're using an alpha, but we haven't checked the blending transparency in the common tab. So let's do that right now. All right. And now let's change a few things, especially in the compositing. So let's start by creating a background. So we will adjust the background and just create a simple null. And then we are going to create a simple constant. We're creating it from the null so we can have basically the same size. As you can see, it's 2080. By default, it's going to be 2 and 56. So instead of having to change this value, we're just going to go from the null, and then we're going to add a simple over. So here you go. And then we can link these two elements and finally change the color to black. All right, so that's good. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is play with our focus. So create this kind of tilt shift effect. So the front of the image is going to be blurred and the back is going to be blurred, and we're going to have a plane that's going to be in focus. So to do this, we are going to use a depth top. So then we can add our element to the depth top. As you can see right now, it's already in gray, but it's a really subtle effect, but we're going to change the parameters to adjust it so we can really see the depth. But as you can see, when it's in the back, it's completely white. So let's change it to 32-bit. And then we're going to also change the camera space. And then you can see it's totally black. But the thing is, the far distance is considered as 1000, which is really far. We're going to change that value and then adjust it as we go. So let's try with 10. As you can see, 10 is not so bad. And as you see, when it's in the back, it's getting more white, and when it's in the front, it's more black. So as we work, let me just show you the effect that we can create. So we use a luma blur. Luma blur is simply going to blur the part of the image that's in white with the second image we give it. So as you can see, I'm going to just add extra blur. The further away it gets, the more blurry it gets. So this is the basics of how luma blur works. Now, if we adjust a little more of the far parameter, as you can see, it's really an exaggerated version, but we're going to change that afterwards. But just to show you the idea of how the luma blur works. So the thing we're going to try to achieve right now is have this effect, but also on one plane that's not exactly in front of us. So we're going to use a level and then invert this image. And finally, we're going to add another top, which is going to be our composite top. Composite, yeah, right there. And then we're going to use a difference right here. So as you can see, there's a zone in the front that's white, and the back is also white, and in the middle, it's dark. So this means that we're going to adjust our parameters to play with the dark zone. So this zone is going to be clear, and the rest is going to be blurry. So let's play a little bit with those parameters so we can adjust it to our need, and also with our gamma. And that seems good. As you can see, it's kind of dark especially in the middle, and then there's the front and the back, which are white. So if we put it in our Luma blur, you can see that in the middle it's clear, and in the back, in the front, it's blurry. But then you need to adjust a little bit of these values so it's not as obvious as it was, but it's kind of interesting to have this effect right now. So that's good for compositing. And now we're going to change other elements. So the next thing we're going to do is create another geometry. So this is going to be our spheres. So let's create a sphere. Add it there, and then right click and geometry to create the next geometry. So as you can see, it's a really large sphere, but this is going to be an instance sphere. So let's create our instances. So first thing we're going to do is sub to chop, and then we're going to use the x, y, and z values of all the points that we have in the image. So every time lines crosses, this is going to be the points where we're going to add our spheres. So let's go in instances, turn it on, and then drag and drop the elements. So as you can see, this really slows the examples. So I'm just going to pause it right now. And let's change a few values. So as you can see, I had a big drop in FPS. So I'm going to reduce these values a little bit. And also, what I'm going to do is change the size of the spheres. So let's just go to something very small. I'm going to use just the values I had in the example I just showed you I created before. So let's change to 0.008. Okay, so it's good. Maybe it's a bit too small. We don't see the sphere anymore. But yeah, maybe let's just adjust it to a sphere of the size which we can see. Okay, so now we can see the little sphere. Now let's change the translate x, y, and z, tx, ty, tz, so we can place the spheres on top of the terrain. So maybe now we're going to do a little bit smaller. Yeah, that's cool. All right, so now it's getting interesting, but we're going to change a few parameters in our noise. So let's play with different parameters that we have. So first off, we have the seed. So the seed is really something that you can basically choose whatever value you want. You don't actually need to use exactly the same seed. It's basically going to change how the noise is going to behave, but basically you can choose the number you want and it's going to create a different effect. Then we change the period value, and we're going to reduce the amplitude value too. So as you can see, it's more subtle waves and more waves and a bit smaller waves. So this is pretty good effect that we wanted to achieve. So maybe change a little bit this value, and that's good. All right, so the next thing we have to do is add our material to our spheres. So the basic material we can add is a fung. So go into material, get a fung, and change the value that you will need, that you will have in the parameters. So let's choose a color. I chose this color in the example I show you. So let's get something blue. And then in the constant value, I'm gonna go with something almost white, so very high. That's it. So this is basically the number that we had in the examples. So that's good. I'm gonna keep this one. And also, I'll also check blend transparency. And as you can see, you cannot see the line disappear, but you can see that the sphere doesn't. The thing is, the line have a distance far value, but it's not hit by light. But for a fung, you need to do this in the setting of the camera and change the fog. So you can modify the fog to make it black like this one, and adjust the distance so it can kind of match the distance of the lines. So that's good. As you can see, there's the value inside the line, but it's not exactly the same effect. So I prefer to adjust it by the hand. But if you need to, you can also reference it. And that's pretty good. This is basically the same effect. And now the thing we're going to do is play with the alpha values so we can animate the different alphas. So to animate it, we're going to use a pattern chop. So we're going to play with the alpha values of these two elements and use a function to change that. So in the pattern chop, simply get a pattern chop, and then you can change it to make a sine, a cosine value, ramp, well, pretty much the value, the function you want. I will use a sine and change the value to me.time.end, so which is the length of our timeline right here. So it's gonna go from 0 to 1 to -1 and then to 0 again. So if I change the alpha value of the line near by just dragging and dropping it, you're gonna see the effect, which is basically that the line disappears. But the thing is, it stays at 0 for a very long time. The thing is, we're going from 0 to 1, then -1, but we don't want to do that. What we're going to do is going from 0 to 1, and we're going to reduce our amplitude and change our offset. So we're going from 0 to 1 to 0, and then again. So it's going to be a loop where the values are going to change from 0 to 1, and we're going to copy and paste it for the font too. So basically on our alpha, we change that, and that's it. Of course, right now it's synchronized, so the two values are changing at the same time, but we can change the phase from -0.5, and then, and -5, we can change this value, so -0.5, and that's it. So as you can see, the sphere appears and then the line appears afterwards. So we can this function is desynchronized, and then we can play with this value. But the thing is, as you can see, when the spheres are transparent, it creates a black element on the lines. So to change that, we're going to go into the common tab and change the depth function and place it to always. And on the other one, in the same tab, we're going to change to not equal. So as you can see, the two elements appear and disappears, and there's no like black there's no like black mark on the lines because where the spheres should be. So the last thing we're going to do is if you want to create more of a loop and animate it from and play it in a loop and don't see any stutter because the animation restarts, what we can do, as you can see right now, it's simply using our apps time. But what we can do is use another pattern. That's what I use in the example that I just showed you in the beginning. So let's use a pattern with a sine. And the first one, we're going to change it to a cosine, and the second one will stay sine. And then we're going to use these values to change our translate in the noise. So let's do this right now. Place it into the translate Y, and the other, and place it in translate Z. And now if you change the length of these elements to me.time.end, so it's going to have the exact time of the timeline, the translation is going to be moving for the whole timeline and then start again. So the thing that we do is using a sine and cosine is going to create this effect where it doesn't look too much like it's moving in one direction. If you take a look at the terrain, if you don't pay too much attention, you don't see it as moving in one direction. But if I place another sign, you'll see that it's going to go from one side to the other side, and also there's kind of this stop moment. So having two different functions that are going to loop is going to be able to create this effect where you don't look like you're going into one direction and another, and it's more like if it's a random noise affecting the whole terrain. So that's it for this tutorial. I hope you've enjoyed it. And if you have any questions, you can ask them in the comments. I'm going to read them and try to answer my best. And I will do more tutorials in the future, so you can subscribe, and see you in the next one.